Live. Hola. Buenas tardes. Hello. Afternoon. Good afternoon. Here it is, a Friday afternoon, two lives in 1 week. Don't get used to this, y'all. Because this will not be happening every week. So glad you could join us live. If you are watching this on the replay, I'm glad you tuned in. Today, we are going to be talking all things Turkey. And is it Turkey?
It's Turkey.
Turkey. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I can remember that because in Spanish it's Turquia.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
basically the same.
Okay.
Turkey.
All right. So
Mhm.
that makes it easy for me.
Yes.
With my
Nobody,
guest.
nobody in Turkey is ever going to correct you about this. Everybody's going to say Turkey. So
Okay. Well, I used to be a geography teacher. So calling a country by their new name, like I was when January 2020, I was in Czech Republic and I'm hollering about Czechia. And people were like, "You going where?" And I was like, they changed their name. So I try to use the correct terminology when I can. So that's what we're talking about today. If you are new here and you have no idea who I am, let me introduce myself. My name is Adelia Aborashade. And as you can see, most people know me on the internet as Picky Girl Travels the World. I have been living abroad for 6 years next week. And on this channel, we talk about that. We talk about travel. I am the founder of Picky Girls Travel Solo, which is a Facebook group for Black women in femme solo travelers of all experience levels. Um, and on this channel, we also talk about finances because let's be real. If you want to travel the world, you want to live somewhere else, you got to have some money. So if any of those topics are of interest to you, go ahead, subscribe. We are happy to have you join the conversation. Okay. So let's give a warm welcome to our returning guest, Miss Laila. Some of you may recognize her. She was on the panel we did about the generational panel. We had a baby boomer, Gen Xer, Zennial, Millennial, Gen Z. But today she is here to talk about the country she is in right this minute. Where are you right now?
I'm in Turkey.
Okay, so I'm trying to think of like where's the best place to start here. Um, oops, hold on, my screen just disappeared. Um, I am. When did they change their name? This was like
It was like a month
six
or so
months
ago.
ago. Yeah, it's
It's
very
pretty
very
recent.
recent. It's
Yeah.
very very recent. Um, okay, so this is not your first time living in Turkey. You, when did you first move there?
I first moved here in February of last year of 2021. And I stayed until like mid end of November.
Okay, so almost a whole year. Now, I've I want to ask why Turkey? Like the world is big and wide of all the places. It's not, we see the pictures everybody posts from Cappadocia with the balloons, but you like, were like, I'm going to go live in Turkey. So my question is why?
So initially, I was like, I wanted to kind of explore the world as a food writer. So my brother and I had this conversation around like Christmas of 2020. And he was like, if you could be doing anything, and what would you be doing? And I was like, Psh, I would be the Black female Anthony Bourdain. Like I'd be traveling the world, eating food and sharing all of that with people. So I kind of started out like I was going to go to Spain because I was like, oh, and now I'm kind of like people kind of tell me that Spain's cuisine is not that great, but I
It's
was,
not.
I,
And and I know Me commenting on food, I know that that's always suspect, but really is not.
Yeah, a lot of people have said this. So I was intending on going to Spain. I had made all these plans, and then I found out because it was COVID, right? So I found out that they were not allowing US citizens in at the time because this was February. So this is like, well, actually it would have been end of 2020 going into 2021.
So at this point, like vaccines are just being introduced, like
Right.
it's still very, very restrictive.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, well, let's revamp those plans. And I was kind of like, I had some loose criteria, like, it needs to be a place that has things that I want to do. It needs to be somewhere that has really great food. And I don't know, like the Exodus Summit, they had done a panel on women living in the Middle East, and one of the women had visited Turkey. She didn't live there, but I was like, oh, that sounds cool. So I started just like looking up pictures, and whenever I would mention it to people, like people who had been were like, oh my God, you're gonna love it. Like Istanbul is amazing. So I was planning to come to Turkey for 2 months and eat food and navigate like how I was going to curate writing about it, or I didn't really know what kind of experience I was trying to have at the time. And when I got here, I was just immediately in love. Like the plane was descending and I was like, and it just, I kept being like, oh, I'm going to go home next month. Oh, I'm going to go home next month. Oh, I'm going to go home next month. And every time I would get to a new place, the locals would be like, oh, you have to go to this place. And then when I would tell people that I was there for food and stuff like that, everybody was like, oh, you have to go east. So I just ended up staying. I had residency probably by March.
Okay,
And
because
I
we're
was
going to talk about that in a little bit.
yeah. And so that's how I wound up in Turkey. It kind of worked out for me. I didn't do a lot of research. I was just, because as a digital nomad, it's a little bit different than when you're trying to expat somewhere because
Mm-hmm.
your mindset's kind of like, well, if I get there and I don't like it, I'll just leave.
Because you're not working from the mindset that you're like moving your whole life, moving a household. This is a place that would be cool to spend some time.
Right.
That time frame to be determined. And so you mentioned being a digital nomad. Now, the food blogging, that wasn't going to be your job per se. That was where you would like to go, but you already had the kind of job that would allow you to do this.
Right, right. I had already kind of my job, my company had my company that I work for had sent us all home for COVID, and every update they gave was like, we are not going to put you guys back into the office for the foreseeable future. And as of last month, they actually officially became a work choice company, so that's still the case. So I had just before I decided to leave, I just talked to my boss like, hey, what would you think about if I just never came back to the office? And what would you think about if I left the country? And he was like, go live your best life. He was like, you've proven yourself here. We trust you 100%. Your track record is impeccable. Like, he was like, I wish I could leave too. So,
I think I'm glad you said that because I think it's important to say or have someone say that sometimes you just got to ask. Like, prior to this situation, there probably wasn't much that gave you the idea that this would even be feasible working for who you worked for. Okay.
right,
But you decided, let me just put this out there. And you're like the second or third person I've talked to where they worked for a company that was not a place where remote work was a thing. But because they opened their mouth, because, again, what's the worst they can say is no,
right,
but because you opened your mouth, because you asked the question, you floated the idea out there, they had the opportunity to say yes. And then you got to go live a fabulous life in Turkey.
right, right. Yeah, it's just sometimes, like you're saying, it's just closed mouths don't get fed, right? And I kind of knew, I mean, even before COVID happened, like I was going into the, because we have offices all over the country because we acquire companies from different places. And so I would be going into the office maybe 2 or 3 days a week and remote the other 2 days. But I was going into the office and spending the whole day on conference calls with people who are in Cali or in Florida or New York anyway. So it was like, what's the difference between me doing this in an office building versus me doing this at home? And what's the difference between me doing this at home in Michigan or Florida or Turkey?
Okay. Okay. Sounds, I mean, I think that's a reasonable question.
Yeah.
Um, I had a question and I was trying to move stuff on my computer so I could type it before I forgot it. And I forgot it before I got it typed. So, so hopefully it will come back to me. All right. So, you did not intend, like when you went to Turkey, you thought this was going to be a couple of months. You got there, you fell in love with it. You were originally there because you were hoping to explore the food scene. So, how is the food in Turkey?
I love the food in Turkey. I love Turkish food, but also in the bigger cities like Istanbul or Bodrum, you have a lot of variety of international foods that they do really well too. So I'm never at a loss of good things to eat. They do a lot of comfort style foods, but it's also like a mix of Mediterranean food, Middle Eastern food, and then there's this Ottoman influence because Turkey has been conquered by so many different people, right? But also for a time, and even still now, it was a crossroads between Europe and Asia. So they have all these influences in the food that kind of put their own spin on Middle Eastern food. So they use a lot of spices and herbs. It is a very heavy meat based diet,
Which is
except for
why I did okay there.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then in the coastal towns, you'll get places that do really great seafood, some better than others. But yeah, I have found the food to be very vast. And I was talking with someone yesterday. She's in Fethiye, which is in southern Turkey. And I spent a lot of time in Fethiye too. And she was like, I miss Mexico so much. I hate the food here. And I was like, so y'all, anybody who follows me knows that like I didn't really care for the food in Mexico. So I was like, girl, what? And what she was saying though was like, it has so much lack of diversity in the food. So it is one of those places where I think we get a little spoiled when we're from the US because you can find restaurants in the US that are serving any type of food, right? If I want comfort food, if I want home style food, if I want soul food, if I want Asian food, Korean food, Indian food, yada, yada, yada. Pretty much in any semi major town, right? Whereas here, most of the restaurants are only going to cater to your basic Turkish foods, lahmacun, pide, doner, kebab, and they don't serve a lot of vegetables in restaurants. I still haven't really figured out why that is. But
And
if you
again, I had no issue with that.
yeah, so sometimes it's just if you need vegetables, I have to cook my own vegetables at home. But other than that, I really, really enjoy the cuisine. My favorite meal by far is breakfast. Again, if any of you follow me, you already know like Cavalti, I want to eat it every day. Yeah, I've had a really great experience. I actually curated my own food tour when I went east. We did 4 or 5 cities in 8 days, and I got to cook with the top chefs in the country. I cooked in the villages with the grandmas and aunties. I ate food everywhere. So yeah, I ended up having some really amazing food experiences here.
Okay, this was not a question on my list, but you mentioned it. What is the difference between doner and kebab?
So a doner is it's like a more of a wrap. It's like what we would
Okay.
consider almost like a pita wrap, but
Pita.
it's not
Okay.
pita bread, right? And then a kebab is just the meat on a stick. It's
Okay. Okay.
marinated, it's ground meat, marinated. They wrap it around a stick, they stick it in a
Those
wood fire.
those are
So,
two things that I would order, but like I don't speak Turkish. But I was like, that's meat. There might be pita bread involved. I'm good to go.
yeah.
And of course, the baklava. I had life-changing baklava in Istanbul. There's no other way to describe it.
Yeah, I didn't even like baklava until I got here because in where I'm from in Michigan, in Southeast Michigan, we have a we probably have the largest Arab population outside of the Middle East. So we have all, and I used to hate baklava. They make it way too sweet in the States. It's syrupy and weird tasting, but whoo, here,
Yeah.
yes. And actually, that's all. I've been here for almost 3 weeks, and I have not gone to get baklava yet. And have a favorite place, so I'm like, I got to get there.
That is the main reason I'm like trying to get back is because I want some more baklava. Um, I'll put your Instagram up here if you want
Thank
to see
you.
what she's up to in Turkey and what her Turkish breakfast looks like and all that kind of stuff. Um, I'm trying to think of what my next question was because we were talking about food. Okay. Um, you have visited multiple areas in Turkey. Um, do you have a favorite?
I do have favorites. I do have favorites. Well, you know what? It's hard to say I have favorites. I have very few places that I did not like. Um, but yeah, I think everybody knows Istanbul, and I think now from Instagram culture, people are really familiar with Cappadocia. But I would say one of my favorite regions that people never really go to is the Karadeniz region, which is northern Turkey. It's the Black Sea region that borders on the Black Sea, like Georgia's across the water, or we share a border with Georgia. It's gorgeous. It's very green, waterfalls, completely different cuisine from the rest of the country, like just a completely different vibe. Historic stuff, monasteries, like way up in the mountains. It's gorgeous and very serene. So that's probably one of my favorite lesser known places. And then southern Turkey, I loved. When I came back this time, I was actually intending on getting a place in Fethiye. It's in southern Turkey in the province of Muğla. And it's kind of like a hipster type place, but it's on the seaside. It's smaller than Istanbul, so I get really intimidated by big cities. So it's definitely got like a smaller kind of uh, population, a slower pace. The food is not as diverse in Fethiye, but I just really loved it. Bodrum is another favorite. If you're looking for Greece vibes, my Turkish friends will tell you that it's better than the south of France. It's better than Greece. I haven't been to either yet, so I can't vouch for that. But I have some friends that really love Mykonos that will tell you that Bodrum, like Mykonos, don't have nothing on Bodrum. Like it's very posh, very beautiful boats, marinas, seaside, fishing villages, excellent food, beach clubs. Yeah. So, and then Kosh is another favorite. I actually have a YouTube video on my top 5 places too. So people should check that out. But other than Cappadocia and Istanbul, and then Kosh would be the fifth place. It's a really small town in southern Antalya province. And it's very slow. It's a very slow paced place, but that's kind of my vibe. Like, I don't need a lot going on. I absorb energy. So, like, I don't need a lot going on around me most of the time. So, anywhere that's on the water where I can look out and be on the water and go hiking up in the mountains for hours, like, those are going to be my favorite places.
And no, and Turkey's got lots of that. Uh, talking about say no more, sis. Um, okay, so you moved there thinking you'd kick it for 2 months or so, and then you ended up getting residency. Um, why?
So I ended up getting residency because as a US citizen, you can be in Turkey for cumulatively 90 days in a 6-month period, similar
Okay.
to the Schengen countries, right? Or the UK. So I had been there. It took me a while to acclimate, right? This was my first time living out of the country. This is my first time being abroad alone. And here I picked way over in Turkey. Nobody speaks English. 8 hour time difference depending
They
on
don't use our alphabet.
don't use our it's completely different, right? So it took me a while to just acclimate to the time zone. It took me a while to like, if I'm honest, it took me a while to not be scared, right? Like I was in an Airbnb in a high rise, like alone. And like the first 4 days I was staying in a hotel. So then I got to my Airbnb and I was like, up until then I had kind of had like a private driver with me and, whatever. And so I woke up the next morning like, what the did I do? And so it took me just a minute to like start going out and actually exploring. And so I started to get this like, oh my God, my time is running out. And then I was like, well, you ain't got nowhere to be. Like, you don't have no house back in the States. Like, you don't have anything to attend to. So I was like, how do I get to stay here longer? And they were offering a tourist residency permit at the time. That they at the time they had a 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year. I'll talk a little bit about how that has changed now. But I just did the 1 year because I was thinking, oh, I'm going to be on to the next thing. So I did residence. I applied. I used the consultant. I recommend that to everybody because it's so much more complicated than it was then. Like back then, it was like you go to the consultant, give them your money, give them your documents. You show up at immigration with your little folder that the consultant has prepared for you. They ask you, what's your citizenship? They stamp you and they tell you, we'll let you know in a couple weeks. And I had my residence card like 2 weeks later. Now, not so much. Now it's much more complicated. Can I keep talking or?
Yeah, no, because when you said they offered that, was this a special thing they were doing because of the pandemic, or was that just what the process was at the time?
That was just what the process was at the time. And so someone asked about, how the war in Ukraine has affected things, day-to-day life. So one of the things that has happened is there's been a huge influx of Ukrainian. I don't know if refugee is a proper term. So y'all
well,
forgive me.
no, it is the proper term because they are displaced from their country because of the conditions there. So the Ukrainians would be refugees. The Russians that are there are not.
Right, right. So there's this influx of both of them. And also, there's always an influx of Syrians because what's going on down there. And so now it started to shift economies and things like that, right? So now what they have in place is in a single province. So like Istanbul is actually a province, even though people think of it as a city, it's a province, like what we would consider a state in the United States. And then there's districts, which is kind of like what we would consider cities. And then there's neighborhoods. So the way that they're regulating residency now is no single district can have more than 25% composition of foreigners.
Ooh.
So you can only apply for residency in districts that aren't affected by that. That's the first thing. The second thing now is the cost has increased. I'm hearing, I haven't actually attempted to do this now because it's so convoluted right now that I was just like, you know what, let's do that next year and after things maybe have calmed down. But I'm hearing numbers all over the place. So like last year when I did it, I paid my consultant $300 that included the application fee itself, maybe was only like $100 or $150, and the rest was the fee for the service. I'm hearing people who are paying like $600, $1,500. One girl was even told $2,500 because she wanted an expedited one. So the pricing is crazy and all over the place now. And they're asking for so much more documentation. Like they're asking for notarized bank statements. They're asking for proof of purchase of health insurance. So it's just, and it's, in some instances, people are getting quick turnaround and no problems. In other instances, popular provinces like Istanbul, Fethiye, Izmir, people are having a lot of difficulty and getting a lot of rejections. So it's not at all as easy as it used to be. And I haven't verified this information yet. I'm actually going to go see my consultant on Monday to help a friend, but also to ask him some more questions. But I've heard that now they're only offering like temporary tourist residency permits for 6 months at a time, unless you own property here. And even then, the property has to be valued at a certain level.
It's got to meet a certain value. And I will just pipe in and say, because like I gather information from lots of places and I look at patterns. This is a pattern I think we will continue to see. So the takeaway is, if you are considering residency somewhere, move soon, make a move, start the process sooner rather than later. It is
Yep.
going to cost you more. I was thinking about this the other day for Mexico, because the financial solvency requirements here in Mexico are tied to the Mexican minimum wage. Y'all, as long as inflation is going up like it is, expect a spike in minimum wage, which means the amount of money you need to qualify for Mexican residency is going to go up. So, if there is a country you've had your eye on, this is a prime example of how geopolitical things happening in the world set things into motion. It's the same thing we saw in Europe. Prior to the civil war in Syria, it was much easier to get residency in Europe. But then, when they got an influx of Syrian refugees, they started to reevaluate, how are we letting people in and who's going to get to stay? And so, as an American trying to get European residency, it is so much harder now, and that contributes to it. So expect things to cost more, expect the process to get more complicated and more restrictive. So that's what I got to say about that.
Yeah. And the other thing that people should note as it relates to Turkey is you have to be here already to apply for residency, and you cannot leave until a decision is made on your application. So I have a friend now who's been waiting for a month. Like, she's supposed to go home next month. And she's like, so if you leave, they automatically deny your application, which may not be a big deal, but that means you have to start the
Start
process
all over.
all over again. And we don't know whether or not a previous denial impacts a new application. So just, it's a lot to think about now.
Yeah.
And like I'm part of me is like, kind of kick. I don't ever have regrets, but I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't just do the 3 year last year, because I probably could have gotten it no problems. And but even people who are doing renewals this year are having rejections. So yeah, it's definitely changed.
Um, we had a question about, is Turkey considered part of Mediterranean culture? I would say yes. I would also, I was going to say, would you say Middle East? Depending on who you talk to, they might consider it Middle Eastern, but Turks are not Arabs. That's an important
Turks are
distinction.
dead and do not. They will fight you if you accidentally refer to them as Arabs. They are not Arab. They are Turkish.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Um, there are several questions
Okay.
we had in here, but before I get to those, so y'all keep dropping your questions. I am seeing them and saving them. Okay. Um, Now, I thought about you when, this is before we really saw inflation get stupid in like North America. I thought about you when they were talking about inflation in Turkey, and inflation was something like 37%. Um, are you noticing big differences between when you were there last year and when you're there now?
Absolutely. For one, so like most where like the United States, they will calculate.
Okay, hold on. I tried to mute my mic
Oh,
and I pressed the wrong button,
I
obviously.
did notice
So
that the screen changed, and I was like, "Oh, am I still there?"
I was trying for y'all not to hear me sneeze. So you were saying inflation.
Yes. So, like in other countries, like in the United States, I believe we and you can correct me because you would know, we kind of report on inflation like on an annual basis. Turkey reports on inflation like weekly or monthly, like it's all the time. And so you kind of have this situation where it creates this panic which just increases the inflation even more, right? And on top of that, the devaluation of their currency. So when I got to Turkey last year in February, the exchange rate was 6 lira. That's Turkish lira is their currency. It was 6 TL to a $1. Now it is 18. Actually, it might be higher than that today. But when I got here, it is 18 TL to $1. So what is happening now is they just increase the prices, and now they tie all of the pricing of things that foreigners will be looking for, rental properties, XYZ. They are tying all of that to the euro so that they don't lose money by their currency continuing to fluctuate in inflation. So, all that said, no, prices are in housing prices are insane. Food prices have gone up. Going out to eat is more expensive. Taxis are more expensive. I mean, at this point, like places that I stayed last year that I was reaching out to have like doubled and tripled in price in certain regions. And it's wild. So, that's the other reason why I was like, let me just think about this now, because also coupled with that is the expectations that landlords and stuff have around what they are expecting from you as a foreigner. So now 9 times out of 10, if you want to rent a place here, you better have all 12 months of your rent ready to pay upfront.
And that's not surprising given the inflationary situation they find themselves in,
Right.
because you give, because think about it this way, y'all. You tell somebody the rent is $1,000, but in 6 months that $1,000 is only worth 700. So that does not surprise me at all. That
Yeah.
does not surprise me at all. And from what I saw, or the stories that I was reading, the president's attitude was kind of like, oh, don't worry, it's going to sort itself out. We don't have to do anything. And I take it that is still kind of his vibe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Abba had a question about, is it Erdogan?
Yes.
Is that who it is? Okay. You know, Turkey is a place that I considered as a possibility. One, before I realized I can't handle languages that don't have the same alphabet. Like, I'm too old for that. But two, he's a little authoritarian. So I was interested in what it's like being there with this authoritarian government, with somebody like Erdogan in power.
Yeah. I would say in my day-to-day things, it's not really affecting how I move around and what I do. But you have these situations like what we're talking about with the inflation. I mean, he's in control of everything. So if he decides that it's no big deal, it's no big deal. Like
And
they're supposed to have elections next year, and he's like, "Oh, maybe we'll have them, maybe we won't." And because it is illegal in Turkey to speak bad about the president or the government, I'm gonna be very PC about what I say about that. So, but yeah, it's you will find that there's a lot of situations that just are completely out of people's control, and there's nothing that they can do about it. And that does start to trickle down into the disposition of the people, right? Because they're feeling disenfranchised and they're feeling powerless. So,
and they are living in a situation where the price, I was just having this conversation with someone. People in general will put up with a lot of bullshit as long as they got a little money in their pocket. They can afford, like, we can afford a washing machine. We can do these things that are perceived to be middle class or upper class, no matter how politically repressive a government might be. Prime example of this is China. People, because when I moved to China, a lot of people were like, I don't know how anybody can do that. The Chinese are very pragmatic, and they're like, look, life is better economically than it has been in generations. So what if I don't have personal freedoms? No big deal. However, When you start messing with people's money and people can't afford things like bread and eggs and milk, that then often moves people to, rise up. So this is something to consider when you're assessing a country,
Right.
because it's I know, because we are Americans and we are taught that democracy is fabulous and that's what everybody should be trying to do. It is possible to live in a country with authoritarian government and have a good life. An authoritarian government should not be something that you're like, oh, I'm going to disqualify this country. But I would say, look at the economic situation. Like, how are people doing?
Mm-hmm.
Because when people start to suffer economically, that's when things start to get politically unstable. I mean, like, look at Sri Lanka right now. Sri Lanka is a hot ass mess right now. So I don't know if there was anything else you want to say about that.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, right? That to kind of again circle, just make that answer full circle for me, like as a digital nomad, and for those of my friends who are here and not like they're not rooted here, right? They're here and maybe they're living here, but like they're earning US dollars and they can leave whenever they feel like it, right? So, our mindset is kind of like, as long as I have a little exit plan and I keep me some emergency change stashed up and I can get to the embassy, like if something pops off, like we're good. But yeah, if you are going to be living here and possibly, expecting to earn in Tele here, and you're going to be subjected to that, it's going to be a very different and possibly difficult situation for you. And what I do see is, I would say in my circle of friends here, most of my friends are, I would say, like financially sustained, my local friends and my expat friends. However, the people, the more economically disenfranchised groups of people, kind of like you said, they know how to tighten up, they know how to move differently until the basics start to get compromised. So it's definitely something to be mindful of and think about. And this is the other aspect of why, I can understand why they're wanting to now limit how many foreigners are in their country, right? Because you have the people who own stuff, the people who are already doing well are actually benefiting from charging these higher prices, because it's like, listen, you already own this property. So technically, even though inflation is going to impact how much that rent is really valued at in a couple months, you already own this property. You know what I'm saying? So now it's a matter of like, are you just being greedy, or are you just kind of, you capitalizing on the fact that people are here with euros and pounds and dollars, and so that's that on that.
Yep. Yep. Okay. We talked about residency. Um, we talked about inflation. Let me see, because I have my own questions, but let me see what other questions there are here. Okay, somebody had a question about the economic situation. We talked about the war. Um, there are a couple of more questions about visas. Is there a visa limitation or any length of stay restrictions for tourists seeking residency?
Okay, so the basic rule for your tourist visa, if you're a US citizen, is cumulatively you can be in the country 90 days every 6 months. If when you are in that 90 days, let's say you go to Turkey, you come to Turkey today and you apply for residency next week, you're allowed to overstay that 90 days until a decision is made on your application. But if the application is denied, they're going to give you like 10 days to get out of the country. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does. Okay. Oh, okay. I think this kind of it was in that same vein. If you're only able to stay in the country 90 days, then how do you wait months to hear a decision? There you go. There
Yeah.
you go. Okay. Um, how's healthcare?
So, it's hard for me to speak on that because I've only had to seek healthcare one time. I do not have, like, I have health insurance from the States and stuff like that, but I don't have local healthcare. I just don't need to do that. You would have to do it if you were applying for residency. But, I hear a mixed bag of stories, right? When it comes to the level of care, the bedside manner, particularly if you're a foreign woman or woman of color. There can be some, I have heard some not so great stories there. But my only experience with the doctors here is last week I was really, 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 really sick. And one of my friends recommended me to her private doctor. He came to my house to treat me. A few days later, I still wasn't any better. He kind of, it was a very concierge type doctor experience. I showed up, they were waiting for me, they ushered me back, they wrote me my prescriptions. I went next door. Prescriptions here are super cheap with no insurance. I got 5 prescriptions for like 10 US dollars. But like I said, other than that, I've heard a mixed bag. I've heard some people having wonderful experiences. I've heard of some people feeling like they didn't get the level of care they expected. Now, the only exception to that would be there is a huge medical tourism industry here. So 9 times out of 10, if you're coming for medical tourism type healthcare, you're going to get top notch treatment. But they do have private hospitals here and public hospitals here. Oh, the other instance I had was last year when I needed to get vaccinated. And again, it wasn't really like me needing to be treated. I just needed to get vaccinated. They do have a lot of steps and systems that you have to go through to link accounts and medical records over here and governmental records over here so that you can get treated. But I found the experience to be very seamless. And, the biggest thing would be there are a lot of doctors that speak English. The thing that I would recommend if you're a woman coming is to join one of the Facebook groups for women specifically, or for whatever region you're in, province or whatever, and ask for recommendations, because that is where I find that you will probably get a quality healthcare experience.
Um, I did not know that Turkey is like the place for medical tourism. And I in the hotel, I see this guy who I thought had like
Brain
crazy
surgery.
surgery, which I guess technically he kind of did. And I was like, oh wow, he's and then I looked and I was like, but there's another guy with a similar I didn't know, like if you want a hair transplant, Turkey is the place to go. Facelifts, nose jobs, boob jobs, liposuction, dental care. Like, and then I started to look around the hotel, like in the place where you eat in the restaurant. And I was like, oh, okay. I did not know that. And I was just
Mhm.
like, wow, why are there all of these people wearing bandages on their head? Yes,
Yeah,
because Turkey is the place for that.
yeah.
Okay, we're going to back up a little bit.
Okay.
When you first moved there and you woke up one day and you were like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I am curious to know, were there concerns about like safety and, like how dangerous this place is, that sort of thing?
So I would say no. I think it was more so my concern was just that I was in unfamiliar territory, right? And I didn't and I was alone. And so I was like, whoo, this was not, I just hadn't, I didn't
Okay,
do
because you
the
said I was
research.
alone. And when I hear a lot of women talk about that, it's being alone and being like afraid or feeling unsafe. But what I
Yeah.
hear you're saying is it was more of like, I'm alone and I got to do this by myself.
Right. I'm
Okay.
alone, and I have no, I don't, I need to, and I have to figure it out, right? I mean, it's been a long time since that was my situation, right? Like I'm originally from Michigan, and I think the only other thing I can compare it to is when I was 18, I moved to North Carolina and didn't know anybody to go to college. And my parents left me, they dropped me off and literally left the very next day. So that's the only other time I had ever been somewhere unfamiliar and like, okay. But then it's like, you kick into gear like, listen, it's a country. Like you have everything you need in the palm of your hand in terms of information, Google Translate, and the people are super nice. Like everybody's willing to help. I was in a high-rise building with 24/7 security, so I definitely wasn't feeling unsafe about where I was living. My driver had already told me like this is a gentrifying area, so you're safe walking around here, but don't go two streets over. So I kind of already knew like where to be and not to be. And even in hindsight, like I could have gone, now I know, I'm like, I could have gone two streets over. It wouldn't have been a big deal. But he was just trying to make sure like that wasn't my first impression of being in the city and like super shocked. So yeah, no, it wasn't a fear. But I'm glad you asked that question though, because when I was making some notes about safety, because that was kind of the subtitle that you had to the live, I really wanted to make sure people understand that, to your point of the question you just asked, this idea of safety is so fluid. Like, it's so dependent on who you are and what makes you feel afraid. So, if you are a person who, in general, being alone in a strange place makes you feel afraid and unsafe, then it's going to feel unsafe to you. Different scenarios make me feel unsafe, right? So I think it's all very relative.
Well, the thing I say all the time, safety is an illusion. Because we are not safe anywhere. Those of
No,
us from the United States know this better than anyone. You can be at the grocery store and be murdered. You can be at school and be murdered. So it's not, I firmly believe if you let go of this idea that some places are more safe than others, or this place is safe and that place is not, and you realize it does not matter where you are, horrible things can happen to you. One, it's very freeing. And two, you realize it's more about how do you feel? You feel more safe, you feel more secure when you are in places with these characteristics.
right.
But I don't firmly believe that there is any place that is safer or less safe. Cause
I
and if
100% agree.
and when you're moving through this life as a black woman, ain't no place safe for us, y'all. So
Yeah. And I think that, even that statement, right? I think that this is it's so important for black women to let go of this idea, right? Because this is something that I see it in Instagram reels, the safest places for black women. I see it on YouTube. I see it in all the black sit groups that I'm in. Where can I move that's going to be safe for me as a black woman? And and I kind of get the question, but I think what we need to just think a level deeper in, what am I really asking? And when you get to the core of what you're really asking, then people can answer that question more directly, right? Because when people ask me, is Turkey safe? Really, I have to answer that question on a case by case basis. And I would have to begin by asking you, well, what makes you feel unsafe? You know what I'm saying?
how do
Like,
you define safe?
yeah, yeah, so that is something that's really important for us. And I think it comes out of a lot of trauma that we've experienced in the United States just as a people, where first of all, just the even the title of black woman is not even necessary to label in every context, right? Because there are some places, there are some scenarios that are going to be unsafe regardless of if you're black, female, white with purple polka dots, right? So I'm glad that you pointed that out, because it was something I kind of wrote in my notes. Because, like I said, I see this question so often, and what you'll see in the conversation is a whole mixed bag of responses. I could tell you Turkey has been perfectly safe for me. I have had one scenario where I felt unsafe, and I was dealing with another foreigner, not a Turkish person. It was a guy that I was dating, and it was a scenario that could have happened to me with someone like him in any
Ooh,
country in
wow.
the world.
So no, I like what you said about we have to we have to take it a level deeper when we're talking about that, because and really understand what it is that you're asking. Because if you're asking, will I be like denied access to places because of what I look like, or
Right.
will they discriminate against me because of this, or are you asking like, will I be accosted on the street because I'm a woman? Because this is
Two
something,
completely different
yes,
issues
there's very different
all
issues.
the
And
time.
I think this is the ninth grade geography teacher in me. I'm like, you have to be specific with your questions. Ask the
Yes.
question, because when you ask a question in that way, is it safe? You're not going, one, you're going to get this whole variety of answers. And two, you're not really going to get the issue that you're concerned about addressed, because you did not, you didn't verbalize what it is that you really wanted to know. That's my biggest beef with all of the online spaces, is how people ask questions.
Me too. Me
I,
too. Yeah, and to your point, I think like one of the notes I had made was like we really need to start making a distinction between safety and unfair treatment, right? Because you could be being treated very unfairly, you could be being discriminated against, you could be getting ripped off, and all of those things are unfair, but your safety is not in jeopardy in any of those scenarios, right? So yeah, that's exactly what I was meaning. Like we should ask like here's the things that sometimes bother me in Turkey that are not related to safety but unfair treatment, right? As soon as people find out you're an American, well, foreign period, but American in particular, you're rich, so the price automatically is going up. Like something could be 1 TL for a Turkish person, it's going to be $5 US for me. Like that's unfair treatment. But am I unsafe in that scenario? No. Is it something that I might not want to deal with? Yes. So I think it's really important that we do make these distinguishments, but also that we are specific if we are really and truly asking about safety. If you're asking about what is nonviolent and violent crime look like, what does person to person crime look like? Can I walk down the street without being at risk of my purse being snatched? Can I walk down the street without being approached aggressively by men? Like these are things that I think should be asked as opposed to is it safe? Because like you're saying, this the whole safety idea is an illusion. I mean, something and also another aspect that we don't really think about when we're talking about safety too is like environmental safety. This is something that we never talk about. Air quality, water quality, like building safety. Like in some of these
that
countries,
one.
these buildings are not even safe. Like there are places, there are buildings in Istanbul I would never live in simply because they were built with materials that are not earthquake proof. And Turkey has earthquakes. And if the earthquake goes over a certain Richter, your building might crumble on your head. Like, but we're so busy trying to escape trauma from the United States that sometimes we're missing the very practical things that we might should be thinking more about. And then just going into it, when you go into things with this lens of I'm a black woman and I'm used to being mistreated. And so I got to make sure I'm not going to be mistreated here. But you're going to find what you're looking for if that's the lens that you're going into a new country in. So it's really important for us to start doing the work to kind of heal from that while we're in transition, but particularly when we get somewhere. Because, like, for example, I had a friend who came to Istanbul and she was there. I was in southern Turkey, so I wasn't there in Istanbul with her. And she was there for maybe about 3 weeks. And she had every day she was kind of messaging me like, this person was racist to me. I had this happen. I was mistreated over and over and over. And I would be asking her, like, well, what happened? Because I was there 4 months and never had anything like this happen to me. You know what I'm saying? And not to say, and I'm no different than you. And so some of that though comes from that's the lens that she carried over there with her. Whereas, even when we're talking about the fear and the safety aspects, like I've never really felt unsafe in the United States, even. And again, felt unsafe. You
Yeah,
know, whether or not I was or wasn't is neither here
it's
nor
a
there.
different thing. But
Unsafe, right?
no, I, oh, damn it. I lost it. I'm going to blame this on COVID brain. Uh, because it was something you had just said, and I was going to say something about it, and now it's gone. Oh, no, you were talking about the lens. I am a big proponent of having no expectations when you go into a new place. Go in as a blank slate and observe, how do things work here? What are the systems that exist? This way I don't get my feelings hurt because I expected them to do this and behave this way, and instead I got this. It is more, I go in and I observe, and I was like, okay, so this is how folks roll here. I
Right,
can then adjust. Or let's say they roll in such a way that I'm not down with it, then I know I'm not making that adjustment and I'm going to move somewhere else.
right, right. And sometimes it's sometimes things like this are cultural too, right? Like, you know, a lot of people, well, not, I won't say a lot of people, but some people will be like, oh, I was in Istanbul and people were staring at me and blah, 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 blah. And I mean, okay, first of all, you're a black woman. They're going to stare. Like, and if they're not, if they're just staring, like, I can see how that makes some people uncomfortable. But unless they're staring and like approaching you weirdly or doing something physically to you, like, you're
there
outside of your
there
norm.
are a lot of reasons people can stare
Yep.
that don't have anything to do with that black person does not deserve to be here. There are a lot of reasons they can be staring at you. And one that I think many of us don't take into consideration is how we are dressed. We think what we're wearing looks normal. But if you look around at how locals dress, and I'm not talking about conservative versus not conservative, I'm talking about like the way we put outfits together. Like,
Yes.
they don't dress that same way. And I don't know that we are always noticing that. But if you flip it around, they may be looking at you like, huh, look at that. You immediately stick out as a foreigner because like you wearing tennis shoes and locals don't do that. Or, the way you are styled. Like I said, there are a bunch of reasons people could be staring at you.
Yeah. And it's not always negative. Like we sometimes just assume the worst, but sometimes it's admiration, right? Sometimes they're like, wow, like that's a different look. Cause not being funny, but if you come to Turkey, you will see like a lot of these women, everybody's getting the same lips done, the same noses done. So, like, sometimes I think people are just like, wow,
You
somebody
don't
with
look like
somebody
everybody else.
the cookie cutter, you know what I mean? So it's not like offensive. It's just because sometimes it's just like when we see people who are different and you're like, oh, it's not necessarily like a bad, oh, it's like sometimes you're like, oh, that's really cute. I wouldn't have thought to, you know.
I will, because I am introverted and I do not like to be the center of attention. Dyeing my hair fuchsia was not the best move because you talking about stick out. The minute I walk in someplace and it's everybody's like, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I got you, I got you, I see
Yeah.
what's going on. Um, Thank you, YT. Happy Friday to you as well. I am on the men. Thank you so much for the super chat. Um, okay. There was another question here. Oh, okay. This is what it was. Since we are in the vein of talking about safety, and how are you received as a Black person, a Black American? Because there are lots of places where that reception will be different than other Black folks.
Right. I honestly can say like I was treated like a queen. I everywhere in the country. Like I mean like people falling over themselves to help me, special treatment in restaurants, like everywhere. Like when I was at the hotel, I mean like everywhere in Turkey. I was soaking it up. I'm not going to lie because I'm like I don't ever get treated like this in the States. Like But people, I mean, like women would literally come, like my hair was braided, and women would come over to me and they wouldn't try to touch it. They would just be like, your hair. Or they would be like, your skin. And like, I have never felt more like admired and catered to in my life, which was really nice. Because, like you said, I didn't come in with any expectations. So I didn't know. I honestly wasn't even thinking about it, but I was just like, oh, this is nice. Like, in terms of Turkish men, I mean, like, it is a very it's Muslim culture, right? So the men are very manly, which has its positives and its negatives, right? But on the positive side of that, they really cater to women. Like, we ain't, you're not paying for nothing, you're not picking nothing up. Like, why are you touching that? Like, my friends who are married to Turkish men, like, even stuff as simple as like, there could be a car full of bags. They will walk right in the house and he will gladly be taking everything out of the back, out of the car. You know what I mean? There's just this sense of like, I feel like femininity is very honored in Turkish culture in general, but especially with the men. Now there can be some downsides to that. You do There is a clinginess sometimes with Turkish men, and it can kind of turn controlling sometimes. And I do see a lot of accounts of abuse and adultery. I didn't date any Turkish men long enough to experience that side of things. So I just got to be honest, because I was moving around so much. Like, I would date a guy for a couple weeks and be on to the next city. But all of my experiences were very enjoyable, like very charming men, very attentive, flowers, gifts, foot massages, nice dates, and they put it together. And it's none of that like, oh, I don't want you to wear da, da, da. Like, you can come in with all your things on or whatever you want to look like. Like, it was actually very refreshing. And I felt very welcomed by, even like, this hotel I was staying at in Cappadocia, me and my homegirl, we were there for almost 3 weeks. So, by like the sixth day, because the average length of stay in Cappadocia is only like 2 or 3 days. So we were still there. So the owner of the hotel was like, I'm adopting you guys as my daughters. And like, next thing I knew, we were all at his like private garden house. I cooked with his wife. We had dinner with all his kids. I'm holding the babies. Like, they were so welcoming. Like, I hate to say this, because every time I say this, there's always going to be one person with something slick to say, but like, they love Black folks. Like, I would be places, and when I was down in Bodrum, and like, I was just eating, and like, people would come over to me and be like, we hate what happened to George Floyd. Like, they would be like, they would tell me about how they were protesting, and like, it was just like, I
It's
was like,
Here's the thing.
wow.
Most of us have grown up in a country where by default, because we are Black, we are feared, we are reviled, we are considered, all the negatives in the book. So when you go someplace and that isn't the experience, it is mind blowing. It's like being in a abusive relationship, and then when you get into one that's like low key healthy, you're like, I had no idea it could be this way, that there, so yes, somebody may have something to say about the comment you just made, but your experience is your experience. And I think it goes back to entering new spaces with minimal expectations. It's just like, if now I can't speak to the gay queer experience, but it's like you was dating this dude that dogged you out. You cannot go with every new guy and assume that they're gonna dog you out too.
Right.
You can't do that. You can't do that. Okay. One of the things I'm curious about is you've made several mentions of your friends, both foreign and local. How is this happening? How are you meeting these people?
So, a few ways. It Even though I am introverted, I feel like that shifted
Are
when I
you
left.
though?
I was gonna say, I feel like that shifted a lot when I left the country, because I am also a person that, like, I kind of like would talk to everybody, right? One, because I was alone, but then people will approach you because you're alone, and they're kind of like, especially in a Muslim country, because like women traveling alone is like, what are you
It's
doing by
not a
yourself,
thing.
you know?
It's not a
So
thing.
like people will just come up to you and talk to you because they're kind of trying to figure out like, you know, what are you doing here and why are you by yourself, you know? And sometimes it's creepy, but most of the time they're just kind of genuinely interested. So I would meet a lot of people just being out and about places by myself. Um, I would take tours and hire tour guides, and I would end up becoming friends with some of my tour guides, and they would invite me to meet their friends. The Facebook groups is a really good way. At the time, it's been decommissioned now, but there used to be a Women of Color of Istanbul group on Facebook. And so like I met a few sisters in that group that then introduced me to some more sisters. So I met people that way. And then it's also really important to tell, I know like a lot of times we don't like to tell people what moves we're making, but telling people in the States that I was going to Turkey, like people were connecting me with the people that they knew who either were living in Turkey or had a cousin in Turkey. And so like my mom had a friend who she just happened to mention like Layla's going to Turkey. And she was like, "Oh, my good friend's best friend, my good friend's daughter's best friend lives over there and is married to a Turkish guy. We'll link them up." And we connected. She ended up being, she's still one of my closest friends here. She let me use her realtor to help me find places around Istanbul. She lived down the street from me and like would invite me over for dinner. So I think the biggest things I would say is don't be afraid to talk to people. And even if there's a little bit of a language barrier, you still can sometimes establish enough of a relationship with people to you know, see where things go in terms of friendship. Like I started taking Turkish lessons with a tutor. She and I became friends, you know. Because I was in the food space, somebody invited me to like this tasting, and I ended up becoming friends with that woman. So it's very much so just talking to people, being open, getting to know people and allowing people to get to know you. And then just kind of, you know, the introverted part of me is the part of me that like doesn't really like to have go out and be in groups of strangers, but I had to work past that because I ended up getting a lot of really nice friends that know a lot of really good people that are well connected here, and I'm really grateful for my friend circle. Like I was saying, just the girl who had the doctor who she referred me to last week, right? Like that was a connection I made through a friend I met last year who introduced me to this girl 3 weeks ago, and coming to find out she lives around the corner from me. So I think the main thing is just talk to people, be open, nurture the relationships that you want to have. And then I would say the other thing was whenever somebody would be, because I was in these travel groups and I would be talking about being in Turkey, anytime somebody was coming to Turkey, they would be like, "Hey, I'm coming to Turkey." And then I would be like, "Oh, let's link." And then sometimes a lot of those people became friends that even though we're all in different countries now and stuff like that, we're still really cool. And if we bump into each other in Turkey, we would hang out here too. So that's how and if anybody, I don't know if, I think my blog is linked on my Instagram, but I actually have a blog about this called "Help, I'm an Expat and I Have No Friends." And because this is a thing I see all the time where people are like, "I've been here 3 months and I don't have friends," and I'm like, "What?"
Well, from
So yeah,
every example you gave, it's about, it boils down to community, whether that is from people making connections for you, being open to when opportunities present themselves to build community, or being a part of online spaces where you can then make connections and people are like, "Hey, I'm coming through, can we link up?" You know, that sounds like what it all boils down to.
yeah,
Now we discussed that you are a digital nomad, or at least this kind of was the beginning of that journey for you, wasn't it?
yes.
Now, are there any particular like struggles? I'm thinking of the person watching this who is considering pursuing a digital nomad lifestyle. So when you first began this lifestyle, you happened to be in Turkey. were there any particular like concerns or struggles or issues that you faced in that process in the beginning?
So, yes, yes. I would like to use the word challenges, maybe more than struggles.
Okay.
But
Okay.
so I think the most challenging parts were just figuring out how to do things that I had never done before, right? Like I've never had to purchase a plane ticket in a foreign country before. So like the first time I purchased my own plane ticket, I purchased it at the wrong time because I forgot that they use 24-hour clock here. So I bought a ticket for 1 p.m. thinking it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was really 1 a.m. in the morning. So there would be little stuff like that where it's like you're kind of scared to do those things for the first time. And then there's always just a lot of planning, right? There's the planning, there's the constant planning, and there's the constant revisiting of your budget, right? That that can be a little stressful, especially if, like, for me, I try to stay places at least 3 weeks because anything less than that for me is just too much moving around, too much replanning all the time, because you want to have enough time to experience where you are and enough time to kind of vet out and plan the next place that you're going. So I would say that's a challenge. The other challenge is establishing a routine, whether that's like a regular work, a routine for being productive, a routine for working out and exercising, taking care of your health, a routine for cooking. I mean, because in some places, they're not even going to have the same foods that you're used to cooking. So, like, for a long time, I didn't cook here. I would order out every day because I was like, the things that I'm used to cooking, I don't necessarily know how to put that together with what's in the store, and everything's in a foreign language. And eventually I did get more comfortable with that because I started gaining too much weight from eating out all the time. But, like, that was kind of a challenge. And every time you go to a new country, you go through this acclimation process, right? And if you're changing time zones, like readjusting your sleep schedule and how
And you're trying to work during all of this as well.
work. Yeah. And so that brings up another challenge. Like, I'm fortunate to be working for a company, I have a job. But if you are an entrepreneur or doing something independent or living off of savings or something like that, there's the challenges of, how do I continue to make this work in a way that fits within the framework of me needing to get work done, me needing to stay within a certain budget, and things like that can be challenging. Rentals is kind of challenging sometimes because you're only renting short term. You're not, so you might look at cost of living for a place and it'll say, oh, the average rental price here is $400. And then everything, first of all, they're not telling you what you're not getting with the $400. So by the time you add in the fact that you actually want water pressure, consistent electricity, high speed Wi-Fi, and at least a washer, so now that price has doubled. And then because you're only renting for maybe 2 or 3 months at a time or something, the price is even higher now. And then if you're renting through Airbnb, there's the fees. So navigating the housing space can be a challenge too. If depending on what you're willing to give up.
Okay. We had this question. What electronic tools do you use or find helpful in your travels?
So I do use a VPN. My company has a VPN that we're required to use for my work stuff. And then on all my personal devices, I use Express VPN. And just a note on that's important for people to know is that not every VPN is allowed in every country. So I actually think Turkey may have just banned Express VPN because I've been having problems with it for the last like 5 days. And some of my other friends are too. And I came over here with NordVPN, and 4 months into my stay last year, it got banned here. So that's something to think about. And also, there's going to be certain apps that, like certain financial US based apps,
That are
that you
not
cannot
gonna.
log into whether you're on VPN or not. So that's a thing. But I do use the VPN. Um, The other thing is the phone. So I travel with two phones now just because that makes the most sense for me in my situation, because all of my work authentication goes through my phone. All of my bank stuff is tied to my US based phone number. And so I have to keep my US based phone number. The dual SIM situation, like I just haven't figured it out yet to know if and I'm always in a foreign country trying to figure it out, and I don't want to like accidentally deactivate something. So now I travel with two phones, one that I use a local SIM card in, the other just stays my US phone. And it has a plan on it that I can use it wherever pretty much without any issues. I do travel with a plug adapter because not every country uses the same type of plugs that we use here. And in some instances, you might also need a voltage converter. Um, Even with the voltage converter, I wouldn't rely on that too much because you can blow your stuff up. Sometimes it just doesn't matter. But I do travel with just a one plug converter because some of my devices I don't have a local plug for yet. But usually you can find those things while you're here. But if you're just kind of like me, where you like to get somewhere and be able to set up and go and then find the stuff that you need, I travel with that. Those are probably the big ones. I don't use a hotspot. I've never needed to. I've never, the places that I've been where the Wi-Fi was really spotty, either I was on vacation and not really working, or like in my job, I have certain days where I'm in control of my calendar for the most part. So if I have a day where the Wi-Fi is really jacked up, I can move all my meetings around to where, like, okay, I can still work today, but I just can't do like Zoom meetings or whatever. So I've never really needed a hotspot. Somebody asked what's a VPN. So it's a virtual private network. Basically, when you log into a computer, you have an IP address. And when you're in a foreign country, it's going to come through as a foreign IP address that's going to determine what you can and cannot access in other countries, or sometimes in that country. So what a VPN will do is the VPN will basically wrap around that existing foreign IP address and give you it will give you a IP address in whatever country you need it to be in.
And
So
it
you
will, like, if you're using public Wi-Fi in coffee shops, you should be running a VPN on your machine as a security measure. I
yeah,
laughed when you talked about VPNs getting banned because, of course, I lived in China for a year and a half where VPNs are illegal, uh, as are many, many websites and things like that. And I would assume in Turkey, it's probably the same issue in China is there are things that they don't want you to be able to access,
right,
and having a VPN would allow you that access.
right.
That's what I would assume. Okay. We had this question. Does your organization allow for flexibility because of the time difference?
No. Part of our agreement was that I would continue to work US Eastern Standard Time hours. And honestly, I don't have a problem with that, and I didn't fight that because in my role, it would do me no good to not be available when my teams need me to be available. So yeah, for us, yeah, no, there's not any
They didn't,
flexibility.
I mean, they didn't tell you to move halfway around the world.
Exactly.
And
Hey,
Candace said
Candace.
hello. All right, let me come back here. Was there another question? Ba, ba, ba. No, there wasn't. Okay. My last question. This is where we will end things. Best and worst things about living in Turkey.
Ooh. Ooh, okay. The best thing about living in Turkey, other than kavalti, other than breakfast, other than Turkish breakfast, is it really, for me, I'm a nature lover. And so it really has all the elements of nature that you could think of, and it's gorgeous. I mean, there's the sea, there's the Aegean Sea, there's the Bosphorus, there's the Marmaris, there's the Mediterranean, there's the Black Sea, there's water everywhere, and I am a water girl for sure. But like there's mountains and forests and waterfalls and green spaces and just parks and gardens and tropical spaces in the south and historic sites. Like it's just a wonder. Like it's a awe-striking place to be, and there's never a short. Like I know people who have been living here 10 years and still haven't been everywhere there is to go in Turkey and see stuff. So that's probably my favorite thing about being here. And it's easy to navigate around the country. Like flights are not as cheap as they used to be, but flights you can get pretty much anywhere in the country within 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours, because it's a small country, for maybe a couple $100 or less. And I love that. So that's probably that, and the food and my friends. And then I would say the worst thing is like the way that there's a very lackadaisical attitude around getting things done. Like the culture is very laid back, which is really nice when you like taking 3 hour brunches and like sitting by the sea and having tea. But like when something is broken and they're telling you for a week that they're gonna come and they never show up, and it's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like, and then just there's not a sense of urgency around anything here, really. And that can get really problematic. And you really have, when you're trying to get something important done, you really have to oversee people. Like you really got to stay on top of them. If somebody's coming to your house to fix something, like you should watch a YouTube just to make sure that they fully fix it, and stand over them while they're doing it, because they will leave your stuff half fixed, like they came and fixed it and leave after they made you wait 2 weeks. So that's probably one of the worst things.
I was having kind of this thought as you were saying that the more I travel, the more I live in different places, what I am coming to realize is that in the US, maybe we're the outliers with this whole like it's got to happen now, it's got to, because there are so many more places where like time don't exist.
Yeah.
Stuff happens when it happens and nobody gets bent out of shape about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Even
okay.
like deliveries, like if you order something, like it's gonna show up when it show up. It might be today, it might be unless it's
I,
food. Like food and groceries will be delivered very timely, but like
I'm
cargo
I'm
deliveries,
I'm waiting for a fabric delivery right now, and I had to go back and see the date they shipped it, and I was like, "Oh, it's only been a month." So there's no point in me emailing anybody because it's like, really, I got to give it 2 months to show up before I
right?
start to wonder, is it going to show up at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for
It
having me.
is, it is what, like 10:30 there?
It's 9:30.
9:30.
9:30.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. Because that's one of the reasons we're doing this in the middle of the day here is because of the time difference. I didn't want Laila to have to stay up, super, super
Mhm.
late to share with y'all. Appreciate you sharing your experiences with us here. If y'all are not following Laila on Instagram and you are curious about the life of a digital nomad or life in Turkey, I strongly suggest you do. All
Please
right.
do.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, y'all.